I married him thinking he had nothing: no car, no house, no real job, just big dreams and a quiet smile. My friends laughed. My mama cried. But what they didn't know, I wasn't the one saving him. He was the one testing me, and I had no idea. If you've ever wondered what true love looks like when money disappears from the picture, stay with me. This story isn't just about marriage, it's about trust, loyalty, and one crazy reveal that flipped my entire life upside down. Hit that like button and subscribe. You don't want to miss this. I grew up where dreams had to shrink just to fit inside the four walls we called home. Our neighborhood wasn't the kind of place you saw on postcards. It was cracked sidewalks, flickering streetlights, and loud nights filled with sirens and shouting. But even in all that noise, I remember the quiet moments, like lying awake at night, listening to my mama cry softly behind her bedroom door, or watching her count coins at the kitchen table just to make the rent. We never starved, but we never had enough either. And somehow, in all that struggle, I started to believe that love was a luxury poor girls like me couldn't afford. From the time I was old enough to understand what bills were, I was told, marry smart. Not for love, not for butterflies, but for security. Find a man who can take care of you, my aunties would say, waving off my silly notions of romance like they were smoke in the air. You want to end up like your mama? That one always hit the hardest. Mama was strong, but she was tired. Always tired. I promised myself I'd never carry that kind of exhaustion on my back if I could help it. So I started dreaming different. Not about weddings or fairy tales or late night walks under the stars. No, I dreamed of men with suits, with cars, with bank accounts I'd never have to worry about. Men who could whisk me away from the broken bricks and peeling paint. Men who didn't flinch when the check came. My family praised that thinking. They called it survival. But deep down, it felt like trading one kind of prison for another. Still, I smiled. I nodded. I played the game, but I kept a little part of myself hidden. The part that still believed in something real, in connection, in partnership, in a kind of love that didn't need to be bought, only built. I never said it out loud, not even to myself, but that longing lived quietly inside me, like a candle that refused to burn out. I didn't know it yet, but that tiny flicker was going to change everything. And it all started the day I met him. It was one of those gloomy Tuesday mornings, the kind where nothing feels right. I had missed my bus, spilled coffee on my blouse, and was already late for work. I ducked into a tiny cafe I'd never noticed before, desperate for a moment to breathe and maybe a cheap cup of caffeine. That's where I first saw him. He wasn't standing out in any kind of way. In fact, he looked like every other tired face in that place. Hoodie pulled up, jeans slightly faded, and an old pair of sneakers that had clearly seen better days. But there was something about him. Maybe it was the way he looked up when the barista greeted him, the soft thank you he gave back, or the fact that he didn't even check his phone once. Just sat there with a notebook and pen like he was sketching something invisible. I remember thinking, he doesn't look like he belongs in this world full of rush and noise. I was about to leave when he spoke to me. You look like someone who's late but still trying to hold it together. I couldn't help but laugh. Is it that obvious? We talked for 10 minutes, then 20. Then an hour passed, and I never made it to work that day. I learned he was between jobs but working on something. I learned he read philosophy books for fun, that he preferred tea over coffee, that he used to volunteer at a shelter. There was this gentle energy to him, like he wasn't trying to impress me, but still somehow did. I didn't even get his name that day. He just smiled and said, maybe we'll bump into each other again. And we did, a week later, then again the week after that. It became a thing. our thing, random meetups at that same little cafe. And eventually, I gave him my number. The more we talked, the more I realized he wasn't like the men I had been taught to chase. He didn't brag, he didn't dress sharp, he didn't have a car. In fact, we both rode the same bus route. But he had dreams, big ones, and not the kind that were all talk. I could see it in his eyes every time he shared his ideas, apps he was building, systems he was coding, businesses he wanted to launch one day. My friends were not impressed. "You're wasting your time," one said. "Girl, broke men got nothing but potential and problems," another warned. Even my mom gave me that look, the one that said, "You're smarter than this." But I kept seeing him, not because I didn't know better, but because I did. He never promised me riches, never even hinted at success. He just showed up, fully present, completely honest. He told me once, "I don't have much now, but I'm building something, and I'd rather build it with someone than build it alone." That stayed with me because no one had ever made me feel like I was the prize, not until him. And even though my head said walk away, my heart told me to stay. And I did. Dating him wasn't glamorous. There were no fancy dinners, no surprise getaways, no luxury gifts wrapped in glossy paper. Our dates were simple, sometimes too simple for people on the outside to understand. We'd walk through the park with dollar ice creams, sit on benches, and talk about everything and nothing. We once spent an entire Saturday at the public library, flipping through old books and laughing at outdated illustrations. It didn't cost a thing, but it felt priceless. He made me feel seen, not just pretty or cute, but really seen. He listened with the kind of attention that made you forget there were other people in the room. He asked questions no one had ever asked me before. "What scares you the most? What did you want to be when you were 10? What would you do if you weren't afraid?" And when I answered, he didn't try to fix me. He just held space for it. But still, the reality of his situation was hard to ignore. He didn't have a car. He rented a small studio apartment with furniture that looked like it came from thrift stores, and I'm pretty sure some of it did. He worked gig jobs, delivery, tutoring, even freelance tech support, just to make ends meet while he worked on his project. And though I admired his hustle, I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel the pressure. There were moments I questioned everything, like the time we went out for pizza and he reached into his pocket only to realize he didn't have enough cash. I covered the bill without hesitation, but that little voice in my head whispered, "Is this what your life is going to look like forever?" My friends didn't help. They made jokes, called him my passion project, told me I deserved better. One even asked, "What exactly does he bring to the table?" And in that moment, I didn't have a good answer, at least not one they'd understand. But here's what I knew. He brought peace, he brought honesty, he brought effort. He never tried to impress me, yet I was constantly impressed by his kindness, his resilience, and his vision for the future. He never complained, even when things got tight. He never made excuses, and no matter how rough his day was, he always made time to check on mine. My mom still had her doubts. She told me I was romanticizing struggle. That love alone doesn't pay bills. And I couldn't argue with that, because it's true. Love doesn't pay rent, but love does show up when things fall apart. Love carries you when you're tired. Love reminds you that you're not alone. And that's what he gave me. Still, I knew we were walking a fine line. The kind of love we had felt rare, but the weight of our circumstances was real. And I didn't know how long I could keep carrying both. What I didn't know? He was carrying something too. Something much, much bigger. When he proposed, there was no diamond, just a simple silver band he placed on my finger one evening as we sat on the rooftop of his building, watching the city lights flicker below us. He didn't kneel. There was no photographer hiding in the bushes. It was just him, his voice shaking, and four words I'll never forget. Will you build with me? I said yes without hesitation, even though the world would say I had every reason to say no. Our wedding was quiet. Backyard, foldable chairs, a dress I borrowed from a cousin. We made our own playlist. My bouquet was made of grocery store flowers I tied with a ribbon. Some family didn't even bother to show up. My friend smiled politely but whispered behind my back. She really did it. She really married the broke guy. But I didn't care. That day, I felt rich in all the ways that mattered. Then came the reality. We moved into a tiny one-bedroom apartment. No washing machine, no air conditioning. The walls were thin, the neighbors loud. Sometimes I'd sit in the corner of our living room and cry quietly, trying not to wake him. I worked two jobs, one as a receptionist during the day, another waiting tables at night. He kept freelancing while pouring every spare second into his big project. I still didn't fully understand what it was. Some kind of tech platform, something to do with automation. It sounded complicated, and to be honest, I didn't really get it. What I did get was the exhaustion. The unpaid bills, the late rent notices, the looks of pity from people who knew us, the way my mom sighed every time I called, as if she was waiting for me to finally admit I'd made a mistake. And still, he never stopped believing. He would stay up until 3 or 4 in the morning, eyes glued to the screen, typing furiously. Then he'd wake up before me and make breakfast, just so I'd start my day with something warm. He'd leave notes on the fridge reminding me that he loved me, or hide little jokes in my lunch bag when I worked long shifts. We didn't have money, but we had us, and he made sure I never forgot it. One night, after a particularly bad argument about money, I broke. I told him I was tired of sacrificing, tired of waiting for a dream that didn't seem to be coming. He didn't argue. He just held my hands and said, I know, and I don't blame you. But I swear, this season won't last forever. I wanted to believe him. But belief is hard when your lights are flickering and your fridge is empty. Still, I stayed. I chose him again. Not because I didn't have doubts, but because something inside me still whispered that he was more than he appeared. And I had no idea just how right I was. I wish I could say things started getting better after that, but they didn't. If anything, they got worse. The bills kept coming, but the income didn't. My second job cut my hours. His freelance clients dried up one by one. Rent was late again, and the landlord started giving us that look, the one that says you better not fall behind again. The stress built like a storm cloud over our tiny apartment, and there were nights we'd sit in silence just listening to the clock tick because we were too tired to talk and too anxious to sleep. Then came the emergency. He collapsed one afternoon while walking home from a client meeting, just passed out in the middle of the street. I rushed to the hospital, hands shaking, heart pounding, praying under my breath. The doctors said it was exhaustion, dehydration, stress. His body was giving out before his spirit ever would. That moment shook me to my core. I sat in that cold hospital room, staring at the man I loved, pale, silent, hooked to machines, and wondered if loving him was slowly killing us both. I remember crying in the bathroom stall, trying not to make a sound. I felt helpless, angry, scared. Not because I didn't love him, but because love didn't feel like enough anymore. I needed answers. I needed help. I needed a miracle. And when he woke up, the first thing he said was, I'm sorry I scared you. I'll be better, I promise. Even then, he was still trying to protect me. After he was released, I sat him down and told him the truth, that I was drowning, that I was losing pieces of myself trying to hold everything together, that maybe, just maybe, we needed to take a break and figure things out separately. And for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. He didn't beg me to stay. He didn't guilt me. He just said, "Give me a little more time. Please, just a little more." And something in his voice, so steady, so sure, made me pause. So I gave it to him. One more month. I told him if things didn't change by then, I was walking away, not because I didn't love him, but because I couldn't survive like this anymore. He nodded, kissed my forehead, and then he went quiet. For the next few weeks, he barely spoke. He worked around the clock, barely sleeping, barely eating. I'd wake up and find him on the floor surrounded by notes and laptops. Whatever he was working on, he was pouring everything into it. I didn't understand it. I didn't know what he was chasing, but I knew this. Whatever it was, it meant everything to him. And even though I didn't realize it yet, it was about to mean everything to me too, because just as I was about to give up on us, he was preparing to change our lives forever. It was a Sunday morning, quiet, gray, and oddly peaceful. I was curled up on our old couch, sipping instant coffee, mentally preparing for another hard week. He came out of the bedroom fully dressed, suitcase in hand, a strange look in his eyes, calm but intense. I thought maybe he was going away for a job interview or heading to see family. But then he said it, something I never expected. "Pack a bag, just for a night. Trust me." I stared at him, confused. "With what money? We can't afford a hotel." He smiled. Not the nervous smile I was used to, but something different. Assured. "You won't need to pay for anything. Just come." Against every logical thought in my head, I agreed. I packed a small bag, just some clothes and toiletries, no makeup, no heels. I assumed we were crashing with one of his tech buddies, or maybe sleeping in someone's guest room. We took an Uber, not the bus, for the first time in months. I kept looking at him, trying to read his expression, but he didn't say much. He just held my hand tighter than usual. About 45 minutes later, we pulled up to a long private driveway. Iron gates, clean landscaping, the kind of place you only see in movies. I thought the driver was lost, but he turned to us and said, "This is the address." We stepped out. I stood frozen, staring up at a massive house. No, a mansion. Cream-colored walls, big glass windows, perfect lawn. I whispered, "Are we visiting someone?" He didn't answer. Just walked to the front door and unlocked it. Unlocked it. I followed him inside, still thinking this was some kind of prank or mistake. But the moment we walked through the door, I knew this wasn't someone else's home. There were photos of us on the walls, framed pictures from the cafe, a selfie from our wedding, even a drawing I'd made him once, hanging in a hallway. This, this is our house?" I asked, heart pounding. He turned to me, eyes soft but serious. "Yes, it's ours." I couldn't breathe. My legs shook. I don't understand." He guided me to the living room and sat me down. Then he pulled out a folder, contracts, bank statements, ownership papers. It turns out that the project he'd been working on for years, it had launched 6 months ago, quietly, no press, no noise, and just 2 weeks ago, it was acquired by a major tech company for $480 million. He was a billionaire, quietly, secretly, purposefully. "I needed to know who was real," he said. "I needed to know if you loved me without all of this." I sat there in silence, crying, shaking, laughing, disbelieving. All that time, I thought I was carrying us. He had been building a future with me in mind. He hadn't just tested me. He had trusted me with the rawest version of himself. And now, he was giving me the world. For days after the reveal, I moved through a haze of disbelief. I kept waiting for someone to jump out and yell, "Just kidding," or for him to admit it was all some kind of weird social experiment. But every morning I woke up in that house, Every light switch I flipped, every soft towel I wrapped around myself, every stocked fridge I opened, it was all real. He was real. And yet, the man I was married to hadn't changed at all. He still made me tea in the mornings, still danced with me in the kitchen while we waited for dinner to cook, still told the same corny jokes and laughed until his eyes disappeared. The only thing different now, I was starting to see just how much he had carried, alone in silence, for years. One night, curled up beside the fireplace in our new living room, I asked him the question that had been burning in my heart. Why didn't you just tell me? He took a long pause before answering. Then he said something I'll never forget. Because I needed to know if someone would choose me when I had nothing. Not my money, not my name, just me. He told me the full story, how he came from money, lost it early, then rebuilt his life from the ground up. When his latest venture began gaining traction, he made the conscious decision to keep it quiet. No press releases, no social media announcements, no lavish purchases, just a small team working in secret, building something they believed in. He had been living far below his means on purpose, not because he didn't have access to luxury, but because he didn't trust it. He had seen people fall in love with the lifestyle, not the person. He needed to know if someone could love him for his heart, not his wallet. I could have dated anyone, he said, but I wanted to build with someone who didn't need the finished product to believe in me, and that's what I had done. I didn't always do it perfectly. I had doubts, I had fears, I even almost gave up, but I stayed. I stayed when the lights went out. I stayed when the fridge was empty. I stayed when the world laughed at us, and that to him meant everything. He didn't reward me with riches. He honored me with truth. We started doing everything differently after that, not because we were rich, but because we knew how to value what really mattered. We bought my mama a house, set up a local fund for single mothers trying to start businesses, created tech scholarships for girls who looked like me, and through it all, he never let go of who he was. He taught me that wealth means nothing if your heart is empty. And I taught him that love doesn't have a price tag. It has presence, patience, and purpose. After the dust settled and the shock wore off, we stepped into a new chapter, one I never imagined we'd live, not in my wildest dreams. But the truth? It didn't feel like a fairy tale. It felt like finally exhaling after holding my breath for years. Suddenly, everything changed, on the outside at least. We moved into the house full time, and I still remember the first night sleeping in a real king-sized bed with crisp white sheets and windows that overlooked a quiet garden instead of an alleyway. There were no neighbors shouting through paper-thin walls, no sirens, no leaking ceilings, just silence, peace. But while the world around us transformed, we stayed the same. He still made breakfast while humming old R&B songs. I still teased him about how bad he was at folding laundry. We still argued about what to watch on movie nights. But underneath all of that, there was something deeper now, gratitude. Not just for the wealth, but for the journey. For every bus ride, every cheap dinner, every sleepless night that forced us to lean into each other instead of running away. And now, with all this abundance, we finally had the ability to give back. The first thing we did was pay off my mom's debt, every last penny. Then we bought her a modest little home in a quiet neighborhood, with a backyard big enough for the garden she always dreamed of. I'll never forget the way she wept on that porch, holding the keys in her hands like they were gold. Next, he created a tech scholarship in my name for Black girls from underfunded schools who wanted to break into the tech industry but didn't have access. The first time I spoke to the group of girls who got selected, I cried because I saw pieces of myself in every single one of them. We didn't stop there. We partnered with nonprofits, opened a community center with a free digital literacy program, and even started mentoring couples who were going through hard times. Not because we had all the answers, but because we understood the struggle, the silence, the fear, and we knew what it meant to come out stronger on the other side. People often asked me, "What's it like being married to a billionaire?" And honestly, the money isn't what I talk about. I tell them what it's like to wake up next to someone who never gave up, someone who believed in me when I doubted myself, someone who could have bought the world but chose instead to build one with me. That's what it means to be rich. Not the cars, not the house, not the bank account, but knowing that when everything was uncertain, when we had every reason to walk away, we held on. And now, every time I look at him, I don't see a billionaire. I see the man who once sat across from me in a tiny cafe, with nothing in his pockets and everything in his heart. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my story, for letting me relive it, and for letting it remind you of something we all tend to forget. Real love isn't loud. It's not flashy. It doesn't come wrapped in gold or draped in designer labels. Sometimes, real love shows up in worn out sneakers and late night conversations. It looks like sacrifice, like staying, like believing, even when there's nothing to prove that belief will ever pay off. I didn't marry a billionaire. I married a man with vision, with heart, with patience. The money came later, but the love came first. And if I'd waited for wealth before choosing him, I would have missed the very thing I was always searching for: a partner who saw me, respected me, and chose me even on our hardest days. So here's what I'll say to you. Don't be so quick to measure someone's worth by what they have. Instead, pay attention to how they treat you when there's nothing left to give, because that's where true wealth lives. If this story moved you, share it. Someone out there needs to hear that love is still real, that loyalty still exists. That struggle doesn't have to mean settling. And if you're still holding out for a love that feels like peace, hold on a little longer, because the right one won't ask you to shrink. They'll build with you, even if it takes time. Like, comment, and subscribe if you believe love is more than luxury. And tell me in the comments, would you have stayed even if you thought he had nothing? Because sometimes, the one with the quietest pockets has the loudest heart. Love.